Well, howdy, partners. I'm Cowpoke, your saddle-sipping guide to the wild world of coffee. Now, today's episode, whoo boy, we're digging deep into the freshness frontier, where beans go stale faster than a cafe romance. Riding shotgun with me are two mighty fine gents, Kevin Sinnott, host, brewing expert, and Kenneth Davids, the famed coffee taster, so sharp he can sniff out a stale bean in a dust storm. So grab your mug, stoke the fire, and don't blink, 'cause we're about to bust some myths bigger than a bull in a bean shop. Let's ride.
It's difficult, of course, to make these judgments because you don't have the original coffee to test it against. In a general impressionistic sense, I go rummaging around the lab here looking for something to take home to drink. And to the degree that that's a test, I have tasted some pretty good coffees that are 2 or 3 months out that were not nitrogen flushed. And I think that in a lot of those cases, probably had a fairly low oxygen in the bag. At any rate, the other thing to keep in mind is that we impressionistically have concluded that very high quality coffee, high quality green coffee, lightly roasted, because the darker the roast, viewers, the faster the VOCs leave the bean.
The building.
And it's a dramatic difference between.
Isn't that interesting? Wouldn't you say that's counter what many people would intuit? That the darker roast gets staler faster. I'll tell you why I find that so interesting. Because in some of the histories that I've read, like in the Old West in the U.S. in the 1800s, there's a theory that some coffees were roasted darker, thinking that they would help preserve the freshness.
To me, it's not counterintuitive. It's intuitive because you can see in the old Pete's roast, you'd see the oils on the surface of the bean.
Yeah.
So obviously, it's more available to oxygen and to oxidization.
In the Old West, coffee was as black as midnight and twice as mean. Beans traveled dusty trails for weeks. By the time they hit the pan, they needed a little cover-up. Roasting them dark wasn't about flavor. It was survival. Burn out the bad. Call it bold. A century later, Alfred Pete gave the dark roast dignity. Deep, rich, and mysterious. But science had bad news. Dark roasts age faster. Oils on the surface mean flavor fades quicker. So yeah, dark roast ain't fresher longer, but it still kicks like a mule.
At any rate, it's been well proven, the darker the roast, the faster the fading, or at least as it's measured, the faster the CO₂, which is a measure of the VOCs, of the good volatiles, the faster it leaves.
Yeah.
So, it's been tested repeatedly. Lighter roasts stale slower, and darker roasts faster. The other thing is that we're convinced, purely with our experiential and anecdotal evidence, that the higher quality the coffee, the better it lasts on a sensory level. The more resistant it is to fading or staling. And Jason had one study that indicated that Kenya coffees had the highest rate of antioxidants. Perhaps this is an indication of resistance to oxidation. That sounds sort of kind of folkloric to me, frankly, but at any rate, I've certainly found it to be true anecdotally. simply
Yeah.
because it's the Ken Davids freshness test, which is if he rummages in his lab and finds a bag that's 2 months old, takes it home and brews it, and it's pretty damn good. Whereas if he bought a normal coffee in a supermarket, he's quite sure that in a couple of weeks it will be tasteless and dead.
Where do you stand on freezing coffee?
Oh, freezing is tremendously effective.
Yeah, we think
Yeah.
so too.
Kevin,
Yes, sir.
I have the information.
Good. Great.
Yeah. This is a Specialty Coffee Association study.
Yeah.
And coffee stored for 70 days, freezer temperature, typical freezer temperature, releases the same amount of gas, that's an indication of staling, as freshly roasted coffee stored at room temperature for 2 days.
Wow.
In other words, 70 days in the freezer is equivalent to 2 days at room temperature.
Wow.
In terms
Well,
of loss of...
Wow. That's
So
significant.
That's powerful. So their conclusion says a coffee stored at 0 degrees is there.
Yeah.
Still does the gas, but significantly slower than at room temperature. Whenever I'm talking to coffee enthusiasts,
Yeah.
is that basically you weigh the coffee for a day. For say you're brewing using a drip, automatic drip, and you do a liter of coffee and you use 65 grams or so. So you would weigh your 65 grams for the day, put it in a little baggie, roll it up and push all the air out and freeze it. And then you have a week's or 2 weeks worth of little baggies filled with whole bean coffee, and you just take one out and thaw it. You don't want to do it frozen because it doesn't grind right, and you're ready to go for the day. A lot of people will just open a bag and put it in the freezer, and apparently that works. But the point is you're taking it out, opening it up, pouring it out, putting it back in. I don't have any study to prove it, but I'm pretty sure that shortens the aromatic life of the coffee. But the short answer is it's a great practice putting it in the freezer.
Michael Sivitz once told me, and I know Michael Sivitz, he had a lot of theories, but in a righteous world, coffee would be sold in the frozen food section of the supermarket.
Yeah, that was a very public position, and I think there's some
One of many.
validity to it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I always enjoyed him.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fascinating. I actually think there's a lot to learn more about freshness. I know the fantasy is they're handing you the roasted coffee as the people in your neighborhood where it's just a day or two old. That's wonderful. But that's just not how coffee is purchased and consumed a lot of times. I don't know about you, but I like going back and forth between a few coffees. I don't always like having the same coffee twice a day. And I do like having coffee twice a day. It's kind of nice to be able to be a little more relaxed in how you use it up. I think learning about freshness is very valuable. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more shows like this.